Hello, hola, konnichiwa, o genki desu ka? If you're new to this channel, welcome. My name is Katie and I do story time and reaction videos and just things about Japan and my lifestyle here as a Jamaican. So I do some Jamaican stuff as well. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to all my old subscribers. No, you're not old. Long time subscribers, they don't know. All right, so this video that I want to react to, I'm so excited to react to it because they talk up the things that mean, so the people them speak the truth. Like, if you're thinking about coming to Japan, this is a video for you and I really want to react to it. It's entitled Why You Will Hate Living in Japan, and trust me, them talk everything that is so true. I can relate. So let's get into the video.
For some of you, moving to Japan would be a dream come true, right? But interestingly, I know so many people from overseas that moved to Japan and hated it.
Yep, that's true.
I lived briefly in Japan a while ago. The year I spent in Japan was probably the most unhappy of my life.
So don't be surprised if it happens to you. Almost everyone who moves to Japan will hate Japan or Japanese culture sooner or later. You might think it's impossible, especially Japan has so many cool things like anime, crazy game shows, and Mr. E's favorite electric baths. Yes, in some public baths in Japan, there are baths that send electric currents into the water. But don't worry, it's totally safe because water doesn't conduct electricity at all.
She's so funny.
I've known so many people from overseas who moved to Japan and then hate Japan after, living here for months or sometimes years later. They usually come here because they loved video games, Japanese culture, or they just wanted some good old-fashioned Japanese fucking. Check out our new merch if you want some fucking too. But after a while of living here, they become depressed. They hate Japan and the only thing they want is go back to home.
So what she just said is really, really true. Like, some persons come here and they're like, me, I'm not leaving. This is heaven. I've seen the animes, I've seen the cool Japanese stuff, and this is a dream until... While some persons within the first 6 months, 4 months or so, depending on their job situations, which she's going to talk about, they just feel like, hey, this is not for me. So let's keep watching.
Snake, are you okay? Dad, I hate Japan. I want to go home.
There are many reasons why it happens. Maybe some of you have heard of cultural iceberg. If you imagine the culture of one country to be an iceberg floating in the ocean, the part of the iceberg you can see is usually the material aspect of the country's culture. So for Japan, this would be video games, Japanese food, cosplay, statues of Colonel Sanders in samurai armor, obvious Japanese stuff. But what you don't see is the rest of the iceberg. And this is where the non-material parts of the culture are. This can be things like ideas on work ethic, views on raising children, how society views discriminated people. It's usually this part of the cultural iceberg that we all will have problems with when we move to a new country. So, because most of you who are watching this video might be interested in living in Japan or moving to Japan in the future, so I thought it would be a great idea to ask Mr. Eat to talk about his own experience and how he's been dealing with it.
No, he's gonna talk with you.
Hello everyone, it's Mr. Eats. Now let's say you have this big plan to move to Japan. As you begin to prepare for your move, you start dreaming about all the adventures that you're gonna get into. Your happiness level starts to go higher and higher, and then you finally make that trip across the ocean, you get off the plane, and you're standing smack dab in the middle of Tokyo. The sights, the sounds, the smells, the experience is all so overwhelming. Now every single thing that you're doing feels like a grand adventure and your happiness is just going through the roof. Welcome to the honeymoon phase. This is the first of 4 phases of culture shock that you're going to experience. Now for most people, this is the most incredible part about moving to a new country. You're going to love the culture, the language, and the people. Seriously, you could get mugged in a back alley and you'll probably come out of it saying, wow, that was the most polite mugging I've ever had. Now the amount of time that you spend here in the honeymoon phase and the next 3 phases, varies from person to person. Now, when I moved to Japan, I was placed in this really nice little countryside town where I quickly made friends and became a part of the local community. I fell in love with every aspect of that town and the people around me. Heck, I even loved my job as an English teacher there. I found so much joy and happiness there that by the ripe old age of 28, I was considering my retirement there. But all of that came crashing down after I met Mrs. Eats. What? No, I... Welcome to the living room floor where we will be spending the rest of our night tonight. Now, what I wanted to say was that meeting Mrs. Eats was the best thing that could have ever happened in my life. But it was all of the other circumstances that followed that led me to a really, really dark place in life. The second phase of culture shock, the frustration phase. Now, once you hit the peak of happiness during the honeymoon phase, you'll start to get used to the new world around you. And your happiness will actually begin to decline pretty quickly. The things you found most exciting have now become very, very normal to you. And the things that you didn't mind too much actually become annoying or even frustrating. But the frustration phase goes much, much deeper than that. This is a point where depression, resentment, and anger really can start to set in. And yes, even though I love Japan now, there was a point in time where I really hated it and I wanted to go back home.
Dad.
So as my relationship with Mrs. Eats got deeper and deeper and we got closer and closer, I decided to leave that small town that I love so much to the big city of Osaka. There were a lot of factors that made daily living just incredibly difficult. The first was dealing with an actual Japanese-style commute. Now, in my old town, I lived about a 5-minute bike ride away from school, so I never had to get on a train or a bus. But here in Osaka, I had to get on some of the most crowded trains and subways. Not only that, but my school was 2.5 hours away. So I was up at 5:30 to get to school by 8, and it was a nightmare. After the 2.5-hour journey, I was rewarded not by friendly, smiling faces, but by... Unless I was a...
Yeah, so for the most part, Japanese children are, disciplined and stuff, and you'll see videos of them being genki, that's energetic, but listen, it's not all rose and peachy, okay?
Handsome boy like one of these members from the band Kiss My Foot 2, I wasn't gonna get these kids interested at all. And yes, their name is in fact Kiss My Foot 2. So every day became this nightmare of getting on packed trains, lecturing in front of disinterested students, and me just putting on this face like everything was okay. Job dissatisfaction is one of the biggest reasons why you will hate Japan, and it's one that I've heard from my fellow expats over the years. You'll most likely find yourself working as an English teacher at some point in your life in Japan. And while I did love teaching at the school that I was at in my small town, it really wasn't the case for my school in the bigger city of Osaka. And to add insult to injury, there is a glass ceiling when it comes to your actual salary. You'll quickly find that for most teaching jobs here in Japan, you're gonna hit the max of the salary, which is around 20 to 25K annually. And in a lot of cases, this wage will almost never rise. Now, you could earn more money if you started teaching at a university or at a wealthy private school. You're gonna be doing 2 to 3 times more work for that amount of pay. Now, while you're young and single, 25K isn't actually that bad. But once you start to settle down and you want to have kids, that 25K is not enough at all. And I haven't even mentioned that it's pretty common for Japanese women to quit their jobs after the child is born. So if you are a man and you are only earning 25K from your teaching job, you're gonna have to pick up a lot of part-time jobs in addition to your full-time job just to make ends meet. And trust me, it is insanely common how many of my expat teacher friends have part-time jobs on the side while they're still teaching full-time jobs. And here's another reason that you're gonna hate living in Japan. The differences in work culture and relationships at the office. Going back to our cultural iceberg, this is the stuff below the water. Things like office politics,
I like the pictures of the people that they showed when they talk about work politics. Hey, these people know they're talking about work politics. Like, yeah, you have a special group of people that Japan's just, like they are gods here.
relationships with your coworkers, the expectations that they have on you at work, and so many other different factors that are very, very different from what you're used to back home. Japanese societal hierarchy also plays a huge role in the workplace, and it's really important for you to be not only respectful, but be willing to go above and beyond for your superiors at work. And of course, workplace bullying does exist in Japan, so if you ever find yourself being treated unfairly,
Oh yes.
don't be surprised if you're told to just gaman, do your best through this whole situation. Loneliness and feeling isolated is another really big thing that you're going to hate in Japan.
Don't talk about the loneliness and isolation. Listen, some people are going through it. Like, I find ways to just, but yo, it is because you can be in a crowd and be lonely. So, you know, it's true.
Most people move out of that honeymoon phase way quicker than they can actually establish a good, solid friend group. And I'm not just talking about occasional acquaintances that you see from time to time and you don't mind chatting to every now and then. I'm talking about people that you can really trust. Friends that not only share the same interests and culture as you, but friends who you can really open yourself up to. But even if you are able to establish those kinds of friendships, not a lot of them have plans to live there for as long as you may plan to. So it may be entirely possible that your new best friend was already planning to move to Thailand 6 months after you got here. And it just becomes tired to go through the same motions over and over and over, rebuilding a friendship, only to see that person eventually leave. So as the stress piles up and the loneliness sets in, this is when you really start to hit the lows of culture shock. And this is a bad place to be in because you just become so bitter and angry and
Bitter and angry. I know some bitter, angry people. Listen, some bitter, angry people, and I'm like, go home. Just go home because you're not managing.
blaming Japan and the country when, in many cases, the country and the culture of Japan have nothing to do with whatever you're angry at. But thankfully, there is a light at the end of the tunnel, and it's called the adjustment phase.
The adjustment phase.
If you don't give up,
long enough,
you will
adjust.
start to adjust to whatever the situation is that you're in. Whether that's being more comfortable on relying on others to help you out, figuring out some solution to something annoying that's happening in your life, or maybe even getting your language skills up to a point where you can comfortably say things that you want to say. You'll eventually start to find some solutions, these little wins to problems in your life that make things a lot easier on yourself. And then eventually you're going to hit the final phase of culture shock, and that is the acceptance phase. You're finally going to be able to stop putting your own expectations onto Japanese society and trying to control things around you, and instead learning how to control yourself into better fitting into how Japanese society works. Of course, there are still going to be things that will bother you from time to time, but you're going to be in a much better mental space to deal with those problems. You're going to become more comfortable with your day-to-day life, and it's not going to feel like every day is a struggle.
So, what are some culture shock tips you would give to someone who is planning to move to Japan?
No matter who you are going to go through the phases of culture shock. And when you do eventually go through the frustration phase, always remember that if you can stick through it, you're eventually going to go through the acceptance phase, and then things will become much better after that.
These are some great tips that I actually shared some of them. I will link the video in the description also. Yeah, haven't been here. These really work for real. They know what they're talking about.
What you want to say? Try to make friends with the locals. When you have friends that are local Japanese people, it's a lot easier to rely on them. And it's nice to know that these people are going to be here for as long as you plan to stay. Have a stash of your favorite foods in the closet for emergency situations whenever you're really missing home. There's some
So that is one of the things that caused my experience not to be so bad. I have locals, like Japanese people, who I can ask to do things for me because it's frustrating to go to the bank, spending hours trying to translate, going to open up my phone account, my phone plan. I took 1 hour to do it, and it's supposed to take like 20 minutes. I took 1 to 2 hours. So when you have people you can call on to make an appointment for you at the doctor, an appointment at the dentist. It really helps. And the company, like I'm with Interact, they support it to a point as well.
Have a stash of your favorite food.
Favorite food? Yes, you all know I'm a foodie and I get excited when I get my stuff. Yeah, have your favorite food, your hair products, things that you make you happy. Yeah, that's right. And this is at the back of my cupboard, so emergency, when I'm really down, I'll get this.
It's really important to make sure that you're not putting your own expectations on what you believe Japan should have been. Accept the culture for what it is, accept the people for who they are, and I think you'll be in a much better position that when you come out of the frustration phase, you didn't convince yourself that Japan is a bad country and Japanese people are all bad.
And what I appreciate about this video is that it comes back down to the fact that all of these things that you go through, you will go through them as a new immigrant in any country. There are just the phases of adjustment and accepting a culture, a new culture, just phases of culture shock, right? There are the phases of culture shock. So don't think it's just Japan. Oh, I'm going to move from Japan. I'm going to Canada. I'm going to Australia. I'm going to America. I'm going to England because things are going to be better. No, you're going to have to deal with new people, new cultural issues. Listen, just make sure that I always say this, manage your expectations. Listen when I tell you, these people were inspired by God. They are preaching. Come on now. Listen, let me tell you something. You have to weigh the cost before you get yourself involved in something. Like you will see videos on my channel where my life in Japan hasn't been so bad, but trust me, it can be.